So I had a feeling that eventually I was going to be able to pinpoint exactly what separates language from thought. And I finally got it. So imagine two people talking to each other, two different languages. They don't understand the other. One's pointing at a tree, but he's actually pointing at the bark, and he's saying bark in his language. Now the other person's going to look at him, see him pointing to a tree, and think he's saying tree. So literally what the barrier is that without the language, our thought is actually restricted with communication. So thought is put into communication, and we relay the information that we're trying to communicate. But when that language doesn't exist in our library of context, or proper term for it that somebody else would understand, our communication is restricted. So there's thought, which is what starts. Then it goes to communication with language, and then interpretation. So interpretation is actually thought. So those two are actually the same, just polarized because it's between two different people. So not sure if I use polarized in the proper context here, but I don't really care. And I can hear Phil in my head going, bam! Come on, Thomas, give us a bam. It's like I was on this bike trail yesterday, and I'm talking to this guy. He says he's from Arizona. And I said, man, how do all these people, not just a couple, end up here in Warren? From all the places they could have gone, they chose here. And I know so many people that said the same story. Oh, I don't know, I just came here for no reason. That's weird. And so I was talking to him about the probability of that. And I'm like, the chances of that are so slim that, the chances all of the people I've talked to alone are even slimmer. So I know a bunch of people that came down here from absolutely nowhere, and they decided to come to Warren. So I'm like, that is a very slim chance of so many people doing that, especially the ones I don't even know about, which are probably in the tens of thousands, so it's just weird. And, so then, he's saying, oh, glad I met you, this and that. And I'm like, okay. I said, yeah, everything happens for a reason, man. And, he says, I started telling him about how I had the conversation with my dad about imagination, found out people didn't have an imagination. I was working with 5 people out of like 60 that didn't have an imagination. So I was like, man, it's got to be more than 2% of people with aphantasia, so then come to find out, there's varying levels of imagination. I didn't even realize like what my imagination was capable of until I figured this out. But we always have a tendency to compare what we have to what others have. So that's why materialism works so well, and capitalism obviously drives that, because if you're making money, you have meaning, right? It means that you found your spot in society where you belong. But the thing is, opinions change every era. So there is no set way of, being rich. It's more about the time, the thought, and the place. So, but yeah, then, so we were talking about imagination and that, and I was telling him how powerful it is. And he takes off his backpack. He didn't have a shirt on. He takes his shirt out of his backpack, and he says, you're not going to believe this. Hangs it up, says, imagine. But yeah, so literally the problem with the connection between thought and language is that thought is restricted by your library of language. So people like me that are able to go out of our patterns, outside of any pattern, can easily make that correlation. And a lot of people, when they hear it, and this is why I say evidence doesn't always matter, is because when people hear it and they sync to it, they say, man, that's me. Okay, well, that's because you were given the language that went with your thought that you were never able to process into language, in a way that you communicate. Like Einstein said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you probably don't understand it yourself. And that's one reason I always, I'm glad I have a bad memory, because I forget a lot of these bigger words, so I end up being forced to use smaller words, more comprehensible words, not the scientific terms that make your brain go all loopy. I'm trying to wrap my mind around it, but it's going in 10 other directions, so it's making it kind of hard, right? Yeah.